So today we're going to talk about composition and in particular the art of composition, because composition is an art form in itself. And of course you know practically everything about composition, I would suppose, but at the same time you do not know everything about composition, and that's because no one does. Well, because it is an art form in itself. And when I say that composition is an art form in itself, I mean that whatever the artwork in itself is, whether it is architecture, a house, or a painting, a portrait, a photo, or whatever it is, whatever the content of the artwork is, it still is true that the art of composition is a discipline in itself. It's not only the artwork as itself, but it's the art form of composition as a discipline in itself as well. So we could also say that this awareness of composition as an art form in itself, because that's what it is, composition is an art form in itself. It's the art form of putting objects together in a way that will charge the space in which it appears in the best way possible. And everything is site-specific in art. In architecture, it is architecture is always site-specific because it relates always to the location in which the architecture takes place. And an exhibition is always site-specific. Even if it is a display of classical or medieval paintings in the National Gallery, it is always site-specific because the paintings and the objects relate to the space in which it is in. So we should practice how to charge the space in the right way with the objects that we work with. This goes also for graphic design. If when we're working on a page or in a frame, this is also an environment, and we have to curate this environment. We have to be actively aware of the fact that we are curating an environment with the art of composition. And this is the relationship, of course, also between manifestation and non-manifestation, and how to charge the space in which everything exists. And of course this also goes for everyday life in a university or everyday life in city life. We are always curating the environment by our own behavior, by the way that we act. You could also say that our mind, our mental life is of course an environment also. I mean, the way that we perceive things is also an environment. Our consciousness is an environment. So if we want to curate the contents of our mind, or if we want to curate our mental life, we have to organize the way that we relate to things that we perceive. We have to have an intention. We have to be conscious of an intention of how to relate to an aesthetic behavior. And as we say in art, aesthetics is ethics. Ethics is aesthetics. So ethics and aesthetics is practically the same thing when it comes to a phenomenological approach as we see it in art. So the mind is also an environment, and we should relate to our own mind also in the way of a curator sometime, even if we of course cannot do that because we don't have any control of what our brain is producing, or what our brain is reproducing, because our brain is reproducing the world for us. But anyway, we should have an awareness of it, so that not only the physical world that we see and perceive is an environment, but also our inner life or our inner relationship to that which we perceive is also some kind of environment. And that is also something that we should relate to and see as something that we can modify and affect practically in the same way as a curator, we can curate the environment of the outside physical world, and we can curate the inner mind environment by our inner intentions. So we should see composition as an art form in itself, and we should see curating the environment with our ability to make composition in itself an art form. We should increase our ability to work with composition as an art form, with curating any kind of environment that we operate within. And this, of course, relates very strongly to the interplay, to the interaction between and the relationship between manifestation and non-manifestation, between positive space and negative space, between empty space, so-called empty space, and objects. And for our workshop, I want us to use charcoal, only charcoal, because using charcoal is an excellent practice, an exercise, because with charcoal, everything is so tactile, and you have to be very sensitive and very careful, and you have to develop the skill of listening with your body. It's a very tactile skill. With charcoal, you cannot cheat. It's not possible to cheat with charcoal, because everything you do will be visible. There's no way of avoiding a mistake. A mistake that is made is already made, and it's when you use charcoal, you will develop the skill of precision. Not only precision, but the sense of sensitivity in your hand and in your fingers. And charcoal is something that is very physical, and that physicality of the charcoal is very good, because today we're only living in our minds, in our computers, on our telephones, and on laptops and iPads and whatever. We're living in the clouds, in this cyberspace, virtual reality time. So to come down to earth, to come down to ground zero with charcoal is a very good idea. So we will work with charcoal only. And if we don't produce anything of significance during our workshop, that's okay, because only to practice with charcoal is excellent in itself, and is valuable in itself. The value of training yourself with charcoal is a high value in itself. We don't have to produce something clever or good, but we will use it in a minimalistic sense when it comes to manifestation and non-manifestation. We will work precisely with that which we have been talking about earlier in the lecture. We're going to work with manifestation and non-manifestation, and space, how to charge a space, how to charge an empty space, only through one or two lines. So we're going to develop the motoric skill, the sensory motoric skill of working with charcoal, with the fingers on paper. And so we will get a physical experience, physical exercise with the charcoal in itself, and learn to listen, to be sensitive, learn to make the body being able to listen to visual phenomena as they occur on the paper with the charcoal. So this is very sensitive. It's a little bit like a Zen practice. It's quite close to Japanese ideas of purity. So this is about purity. We have to be 1,000 years ago in the monasteries, it was also a sacred act. To write something down was a sacred act. And to draw something was also a sacred act, because you couldn't do that easily. And you didn't have any pencils or anything like that, so maybe you had only a piece of charcoal. And with that you had to do you had to write down that which you needed to say. So it's a long ancient tradition, and it's a sacred tradition, and it's the core of fine art, you could say. It's the inner core of fine art, how to practice with being sensitive with charcoal on paper, to see what happens, and to see that to see what happens, and that we cannot cheat with it. It's not possible to delete it. If you make a mistake, okay, never mind. You have to fix it in another way or start again, start over. It's a good learning process to work with it, and that's one part of the exercise. The other part is that we will work focused on manifestation and non-manifestation, and how to charge a space, how to charge empty spaces, how to find the right organization of space when it comes to architecture or when it comes to graphic design or fine art. Right.